As wreckage gets moved, belongings get rifled, and bodies get tossed into trains, victims' families must wonder if there's anything left. A grandmother's ring, a husband's wedding band, a child's bracelet. Meanwhile, the separatists may be in possession of the black boxes, which is like trusting Charlie Sheen with your drugs. And so the world waits for us as we wait for him. Without America in charge, the world's a headless bird squawking in a field of ghastly realities. Downed planes, kidnapped girls, ISIS attacks. The world's always been bad. But as its best policeman embraces life in mall security, the globe is now more worm and less apple. Do you think Putin minds when that shining city on a hill kills the lights and announces they're in for the night? We vote present because anything tougher might incite a response. It's not our fight, we say, about all fights, which is why there are more fights. But the globe won't move unless we move it. If the world were a classroom, America is not that back row stoner writing a hazy case of senioritis. He's the star QB, straight A class president who gets others involved by going first. But if you'd rather steer clear, you better get used to the suffering, because technology will grab every gory, horrifying detail. Hang back if you like, but the vacuum left behind will be filled with screams no iPod can mask. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Looking stellar as ever. Okay.
Trying to look like you.
Well, you know, it works. For me, it's not about culpability yet. It's about taking control of a situation where we can protect the dignity of the dead and the evidence of a crime scene. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it is a crime scene. It's a human tragedy, and it's a war crime, and the president's really done nothing. Some things you said about sleeping policemen jumped out at me today. First of all, I love that you have a lot of profanity in your columns. That's very provocative. I enjoy that. The sleeping policeman, Obama is uncomfortable being the policeman because he thinks most policemen act stupidly. Remember what he said about his friend getting busted in Cambridge. And he wants to have it both ways, because I think if you said in the article, internationally, his hands are tied, remember? But domestically, he's this unilateral president that can do whatever he wants and he can act outside of the Constitution. He can't have it both ways. And when you say he votes present, remember in the Senate, when he was a state senator in Illinois, he voted president 129 times. That's not showing the courage of your conviction. I think the world wants to rally around this guy. This is a moment when we can rally around this guy. And all he's done is saying today, you know what, you invaded Crimea, here's a slap on the wrist, and now all of a sudden they're shooting down planes and innocent people are being killed, and he's saying, you know what, if you do this again, you're going to face further isolation. I don't think Putin's scared of that.
Bob, do you think we're being too hard on him? Or is he, I asked you this before about the idea of playing it cool somehow to, I guess, maybe to express the idea that we're not fazed by this. However, it seems to me that it's like he's afraid to ruffle Putin's feathers because he's afraid of what Putin might do, which always puts us on the back foot.
You know, diplomacy and world affairs are very complicated now. They weren't during the Cold War because there was two sides, two very clear sides, rather with us or USSR. I would venture to say when people talk about securing this crime scene, how in the world you're going to do that without putting American soldiers on the ground is impossible. And I'd go a step further. I think all these issues that are now around the world today, if Ronald Reagan were president, they would still be there and there would be no answers to them. Unless you wanted to commit United States forces on the ground in Nigeria, in Egypt, go on down the list. Do you want to do that? The American people don't want to do that. We don't have the money to do that. And the idea of leadership, what does leadership mean in all this? When Obama tried to get people to do sanctions, none of the rest of the Europeans were willing to do it. Now they're thinking about it. And I'll repeat one thing I said last week. This is the worst nightmare that Putin could possibly have. This is the beginning of the end of his expansion.
I would like to think so, except that his poll numbers are still really high in Russia. Because
yeah, but who controls the polls in Russia?
Yeah, but I mean, they have a state-run media, so they don't know what's going on half the time, and they believe that the Ukrainians shot down the jet. Kimberly, what if Russia is the culprit? We can do things. We can bring back a missile defense system. We could put troops in Eastern Europe.
Right, like Strategic Defense Initiative.
And we have more.
And we can also show some leadership. The problem is, in the skies over Ukraine this past week, we saw the consequences of Obama's policies of leading from behind. That's my opinion, Bob.
Okay.
You have your turn.
Okay, you're right.
And that's the problem. And I don't think Putin's back on his heels or worried about it. His poll numbers are good. This is about oil. This is about access to the Black Sea, and he's not going to stop until he gets it. He's going to do whatever it takes to put his country in the best position possible. Hence Crimea, now Ukraine. He's not Sorry. He's not worried or running out to hire a Madison Avenue PR firm to fix this for him. He's the problem solver. Look at his military and intelligence background. This is a ruthless man that believes in no problem of collateral consequences or damages as long as he's able to achieve the goal. And unfortunately, he has absolutely no respect for the United States or for the president or for Secretary Kerry or any of that group. How do we know? Look at his actions.
Yeah, Dana, in the media you hear you don't want to put Putin in a corner. But doesn't that fear paralyze the West? And this is why we will never ever he doesn't have any respect for us because we're scared of him.
It seems to me that Putin used to be swayed by public opinion and his reputation in the world. But I don't. Something seems to have changed. I think maybe it was after his last election when he became president again.
He's wrestling the tiger.
I think she's right.
Or the bear, so to speak. I think something you said is very important, and that is the state-run media in Russia. They say things on air constantly about the Ukrainians being a Nazi party.
Yeah.
They are told that they are evil. All of the information that is broadcast out of Russia is that the Ukrainians are to blame.
Right. And Western-backed.
So what is interesting, and backed by the West, absolutely. Yeah. So after, in 1988, excuse me, Bob, you will know more about this than I do, but when the Pan Am flight was blown up over Lockerbie, Scotland, the West really pulled together, closed ranks, and they isolated Libya, and they did that fairly rapidly. It's not apples to apples necessarily, but I do think that in this case, you see some very strong rhetoric from our ambassador, Samantha Power, at the United Nations. I don't know if it is a strategy for the White House comments from the president not to match up with the strong rhetoric from Samantha Power at the UN, but it seems to me it might be able to help that if they could make those two things match up and then back it up with some action, it could help their policy position to get Europe to try to take the lead.
Do you know that you said that the President of the United States was responsible for the downing of this airplane?
No, I didn't say that,
Yes, you
Bob.
did. If we went back and listened to the tape, you said that plane was down because of Obama's weakness.
No, I think
I did not say
Yes,
I don't
did.
think she said it, but I think this is the point she was trying to make, Bob. She's saying if you have diplomacy, it only works with the threat of U.S. military action. And when you have series after series of the president with empty talk,
meaning Putin
and letting people slide,
about
outside of
Syria,
what
or
has
China,
Putin done?
Or Iraq, Bob. That's the track record of
Putin's
this guy.
not a threat.
And that's why
he's
not
sitting outside of a broke country that's got some oil. He went into Georgia for a while, got kicked out. He went to Crimea. He'll stay there.
Putin's not a threat? Okay, fine.
No, he's not
That's
a threat.
what the Obama administration believes, and he's shooting planes out of the sky.
Why do you think he's a threat? Why do you think he's
invading other countries?
He is not invading other countries. That's bull.
He didn't invade Crimea.
He invaded Crimea, but
so he invaded other countries.
That's one country. Now, you said countries.
Just one country. Okay, fine.
You said countries.
And he's not trying to take over Ukraine.
Tell me some others.
He's not trying to take over Ukraine.
You don't have facts. That's the problem. You're making this guy a bigger guy than he is.
Listen, he's meddling in Iran, allowing them to nuke up. He's enabling Assad to gas his own people. I consider him a threat. I think the president does, too.
I think that there is let me, if I can just thread a needle right here. There is a lawless environment in that area. Okay, that is a problem. There are irregular soldiers, like mercenaries, Russian mercenaries.
Drunken.
They have scorn for international norms and rules. They don't care. And they were not. It was not Ukrainian. It's all the evidence ties back to the Russians providing the weapon, possibly the intelligence, and maybe even pulling the trigger. To me, that means culpability. I do not think that a ceasefire is enough. I think that complete withdrawal of those three things from Ukraine is an absolute must for the world to be able to move forward.
And the world being willing to join the United States in sanctions, which they're not willing to do because they're worried about their flow of oil and gas.
But
and
that
I go
is
back
the role
to what
of
I
the
said.
president to be able to persuade them. Why isn't that on?
He's tried. He's tried. Merkel finally buckled a little bit over the weekend, but they have been scared to death about losing their energy supplies, and that's the real problem. Now, I mean, I don't know. What do you expect if the United States were to send more troops or more boats and aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean? You think in Nigeria they're going to go, ooh, how scary that is?
I think one of the first things we can do is we are cutting defense to pay for entitlements. We know where that's going to end up. Bob, we're going to end up becoming like Europe, incapable of defending ourselves in the next 20 or 30 years.
We're the largest military force in the world, including every country combined cannot meet our military power.
You're watching China change dramatically.
That's right. And as you know, I've been very strong on the Chinese. I think we ought to deal with them first.
Yes. But Our military assets have become weaker as we cut defense. We should be going in the opposite direction.
Our military assets have gotten stronger and stronger and stronger. It is time they be cut back in certain areas.
But why don't we then use our military assets to help Ukraine? We give them MREs,
what are we going to do?
Food. Why don't we supply them with weapon systems and things they use to combat these quote-unquote drunken thugs
if you don't think that the CIA has put weapons in there, then you're living.
Well, they're not doing a good enough job, Bob.
Well,
because they're winning in eastern Ukraine.
Yes, they are.
And I think we could do a lot more, and I think the Ukrainians would like us to do more because they've asked us to do more.
Yeah.
I want to go to this sound on tape of our Secretary of State on, I guess it was on This Week, talking about the president's handling of this. Roll it, and then I'll go to you.
The fact is that the United States of America, George, is more engaged in more places in the world, and frankly, I think to greater effect than at any time in recent memory. I think the American people ought to be proud of what this president has done in terms of peaceful, diplomatic engagement, rather than quick trigger, deploying troops, starting or engaging in a war of choice.
So he's doing the same thing. He's basically saying, like, you're either a warmonger or you're this relaxed person who engages in tough language and token sanctions. But if you go any over that a little bit, you must be a warmonger.
Yeah, I don't see how this helped anything in the situation. I don't think that it's helped resolve any of the rhetoric, the communication between us and the Russians. I don't think that he did anything today to help the situation at all.
Well, would you expect him then to go into the Ukraine with military assets? Do you expect him to go into Syria with military assets?
I think.
Expect him to go into Nigeria?
I didn't say that.
Bob,
no, you can't. There's no answer to this.
Yes, there is. There are answers. There are plenty of them. Number one, there are 12 nations that were affected by that plane crash. We're the best coalition builders in the world. We've built coalitions that have driven back armies, and we don't do that anymore. If we took those 12 nations and we went in there and we led the investigation, that would be a victory.
But
how do we get in there and lead the investigation, Greg?
I've seen reporters rifling through people's belongings.
But to do a really serious investigation of a crime scene or an airplane crash scene, you have to have access to it, and you have to be able to do it.
That's what we said. That's what you said after Benghazi
yeah, you remember
as well.
It took 4 months to go into the Benghazi crime scene. Where were they then either? I think this is just a way for them to kick the can down the road here and say we're waiting for the IRS investigation.
We're
waiting for the VA investigation.
You think they're just happy that there's this going on in Eastern Ukraine?
Why don't they send investigators in? Because
where the hell are they going to get there? How are they going to get in there when they've got people shooting at them?
We're the most amazing army in the entire world. You said you were the most amazing army in the entire world, and then you said we can't go to Ukraine?
No, we can't.
You can't have it both ways.
You want to put them on the ground?
Everything because we're that good.
You want to put them on the ground in Ukraine? If you want to be a warmonger, go into Ukraine. Do it.
You're the exact same straw man the president.
Oh, that's bullshit.
Doesn't mean I'm a warmonger. It just means I want to protect the crime scene.
The urge to defend President Obama is like overtaking everyone's common sense and civility. And I'll tell you what, the world deserves a better policeman than one that can only fight and defend a president who really should, at this point, be able to build a coalition to at least secure a crime scene.
Yeah, that's all it is. We're not talking about an invasion.
And that's what I'm talking about. The world does not have faith and confidence in us to have their back to lead with consequence, meaning coalition build. Do something so people don't go ahead around the world terrorizing like we're seeing ISIS taking over in Iraq, in Syria, Christians being murdered, Boko Haram kidnapping and raping children. It's got to stop.
All right. On that note,
tell us how to do it.
All right.
Fine.